Hello, this is Jason Reynolds with Followers of the Cross. In my podcast, I interview leading Christian authors, musicians, and others in Christian ministry. I hope you learn a little bit about these people and the work they are doing for the kingdom. Today, I'm talking to Plumb. Plumb has sold more than 500,000 albums and over 2 million singles. She writes for other artists as well as herself. She is currently embarked on the Beautiful Offerings Tour. Today, Plumb and I will be talking about her latest album, Exhale, as well as her book, Need You Now, A Story of Hope. Thanks for listening, and here's the program. So, Plumb, tell me a little bit about your album. I understand that while it's a worship album, some people say that it's a little bit different. Was that your intention?
Well, the record Exhale is the title track, kind of represents the whole project, and I'm just in a more worshipful place, and so that's why the record sounds different than most Plumb records. Most Plumb records have more of a rock element to them, more of a pop rock element or alternative pop rock, like depending on which era I released a project, but because that's more reflective of who I am just musically. But this record in particular, it's different than any other because of the experiences that I had leading up to it. Most records I've tried to make sort of as a kind of, you took my journal or my diary or, my life at that time and you put it to music. It just kind of tells you the story. And so a lot of the records have had some highs and lows and in-betweens. And more recently, I just kind of came off of a really huge high and God completely doing a gigantic miracle in my life. And these are just love letters of thankfulness to him. And so this project, authentically is Plumb, but it's just kind of a response to where I'm at right now. And that's just been in a more worshipful place. And that doesn't mean the next record won't sound a little bit more like, what people have come to know as the sound of Plumb. But this one is a little unique, just like I've made a lullaby record at one point because I was knee-deep in motherhood and had an 18-month-old and was giving birth to another little baby, and shortly thereafter had another one, like right in a row. And so the lullaby record was a little different for me, but it was, again, a response to where I was at the time and just really soaking that in. And I feel like music kind of freezes time. Like if you can capture that moment and put it to music, you can kind of relive that. And it's more than just a snapshot or a video of something you've experienced. It really does capture the emotion, and which is, I think, sometimes one of the harder things to remember of really how you were feeling and what you were thinking. And so that's what this is. This is capturing a moment in time for me where God restored my marriage. It was completely broken and headed for divorce, and our home entirely just is new, and that is completely attributed to what God did and us giving him permission. And so many people kind of, cringe when I say that sometimes, as if God needs permission, and he doesn't. He doesn't need permission, but he wants it. He wants us to want him to do what it is that he wants to do, and I think we get in the way. And so I've now experienced what getting out of his way looks like, and it's absolutely fantastic. And so Exhale is just me literally breathing all of that out. I've breathed in grace. It's changed me. It's made me new, and I'm exhaling it. I'm breathing it out. I'm sharing it. I'm telling my story. And I think that essentially we're all created to do that. Like that's why we exist, to breathe in grace, let it change us, and then go share our lives by loving other people, serving other people, telling our stories to other people. And it could be just over a cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be through a book. But I have the privilege of writing a book and sharing it with the world, and so I'm doing that.
The book I thought was excellent.
Thank you.
And it's very open, very honest, and I can imagine that would be hard, especially with your life having been lived in the public for so long. Tell me a little bit about the process of when you were going through the worst of times with your family. Your husband, I know from reading the book, had left, and at some point during that process, like you've said, just now, you basically gave it over to God.
Yeah, basically nothing, totally. Like, it was my last resort, which, you think it's your first resort sometimes. I think sometimes you know it's not your first resort, and you're just trying to control and manipulate and orchestrate. And sometimes you think you have completely surrendered, and you ultimately haven't. And that was the case with me. I thought I had surrendered that, and I in fact had not, because I was still trying to manipulate certain things, and I completely understand how that is our human nature. So if anyone's listening, don't beat yourself up about that. That is a natural human knee-jerk reaction, a response to wanting to fix something that's broken, that's important to you, and you want to find a way to do that. And for me, our marriage had been amazing, I thought. And my husband would tell you it had been amazing, but he had spent a couple of years, little by little, sort of spiritually disconnecting, and then sort of emotionally disconnecting, and then to the point where he physically left. And those couple of years leading up to that, where that began, I was very, very unaware. And so my husband would now tell you, because we've done some interviews together, that he didn't communicate. And on one hand, he didn't feel like he could. And so I had to own the fact that I had not created an environment where I was open to constructive criticism, that I was open to hearing some things that maybe I needed to do differently. But at the same time, he still did choose to keep quiet, and little by little kind of made an island unto himself, and didn't really feel like he could tell me some things. And then that, evil used that to really just disconnect him from me emotionally as well. And I was, knee deep in motherhood at the time, and potty training and changing diapers and nursing babies. And he just felt like, well, this is pretty cruel of me to kind of put this on her, that I'm feeling disconnected. So maybe this will pass, and I'll keep the peace and not say anything. And so he didn't communicate, and he certainly didn't, voice that to anyone, much less me. And so he even still says to this day that, if you're a husband that relates to that, find a way to communicate it. Find a way to say, you're not possibly going to love what I have to say, and I really hope that you're receptive and that you don't overreact, and that this doesn't push you even further away, but I'm feeling disconnected from you. I don't necessarily know what the problem is, but I just know there is one. And he said, I should have even just told our counselor, or I should have just told a close friend I'm feeling this way, and asked them to pray for me and to kind of give me some wisdom. And he said, but I just didn't. I just kept it all to myself. And for me, I just was so unaware. And part of that was because of what some women will relate to, where you're, doing a lot of dishes and laundry and poopy diapers and, rocking babies and reading stories and doing something for other people so much that you kind of forget to even tend to yourself a little bit, and you don't think you're doing it. You really consciously even might have conversations about how, women lose themselves after they have babies, and, they don't even spend date nights. And my husband and I would still go on date nights, and we would talk openly about how we were not going to be that couple, but somehow we were just fooling ourselves. And I was pretty selfish and very unaware, and my husband was also pretty selfish and non-communicative, and that combined created a disconnect, both spiritually, emotionally, and then physically. And so we bottomed out, and a couple days after Christmas, my husband just was kind of at the edge of where he jumped and said, I can't do this anymore, I'm leaving. And we separated, and for a while it felt very, very hopeless, and at one point it seemed inevitable that divorce was absolutely happening. And there came a time when there was nowhere else to turn. And even though I had been turning to God, I was also still manipulating and orchestrating and trying to control and trying to do this and that. And I was changing things about myself for my husband and not necessarily for God. I was, speaking things that were true, but I wasn't necessarily saying them in a loving tone. And sometimes I just didn't need to say them at all, and they were needing to be kept to myself and just prayed about. And so eventually, when everything that I was trying wasn't working, I remember there was a day that I just surrendered. I was in my kitchen And I just surrendered. And I remember feeling like I deserved God's wrath. I deserved him with his finger in my face saying, you know, you've been really selfish and you've been overindulgent and you've been very unaware, and you have, you know, tried to pretend that something like this could never happen, and here we are. But God didn't do that. Like, I just felt a Savior kind of compassionately forgive me one night. I felt forgiven. I felt that, you know what, you died for me, and you've forgiven for every single thing I've ever done from this moment behind me. And so I don't want to change to get a husband back. I want to change to glorify you, because you're the only thing that's never going to leave. You're the only thing that's never going to stop loving. You're what's going to continue to protect and provide and guide me. And I just kind of had a romance that night with Jesus, where I just fell in love with him in a way that I'd never experienced. And instead of just needing him all the time, I wanted him for the first real time in my life, and actually wanted to read my Bible. I wanted to have quiet time with him. And I had done that in the past out of total guilt and obligation. And there I was, wanting to see what God was going to say to me. And James 1:19 came up a lot, which is be slow to speak and quick to listen. And it's just God's kind of tender way of saying, just shut up, you know, just listen to me. And when I really listened, I felt like I was supposed to be willing to do whatever he asked. And the only way I could even do that was to hear him. And the only way you can hear him is to get quiet and seek counsel. And so I got quiet and I sought counsel. And God said, I want you to love him the way that you would want him to love you. I want you to forgive the way that you would want to be forgiven. And I want you to change to glorify me because of what I did on the cross and out of the grave. And it not be contingent upon your husband coming back or not, because he may not. And we have a choice, and my husband had a choice, and you can't change someone else and choose for them. You have to choose for yourself and change yourself. And it's amazing what you working on yourself can inspire in others. And I mean, you can even take it down to something as simple and as common as someone getting in shape. You know, someone eating better and exercising, like that catches on. If they're not rubbing people's noses in it and they're just doing it, you start to notice and you think, you know what, maybe I should eat better. You know what, they have more energy now. They have a better attitude. They have their life is looking more joyful and more peaceful and more centered. Like, I want that. I wonder what they're doing. And it's inspiring. And so I had come to a place in my walk where, without me realizing it, my husband, who lived 17 miles away, was noticing it and seeing that I was different. And when he thought I could never change, which was part of the reason he left, he started to see change, and that gave him hope that if that part of her could change, maybe some other things could change, even in himself. And he began to work on himself, and I didn't know he was doing that, and I didn't know when that was happening, but months later, we had a conversation, and there was like almost tangible hope that you could touch. And so we began to date. After holding hands for the first time in 6 months, we began to date for a year, and we just sort of dated, and there was a process of holding hands, and then there was a time where we kissed. There was a time that we exchanged I love yous. Again, there was a time that we put our rings back on. There was a time that he moved back into the house and started in the guest room. And it was just, everything kind of was a process. And that was no real wisdom of our own. That was God, 100%, his Holy Spirit leading us and prompting us, because we'd finally come to a place where we really listened to what he said. And we were asking what he wanted, instead of just saying, hey, God bless this, we're going to go do this. Because it's good. And there's a lot of things in this world that are good, but they compete with what is great, and they compete with what is best. And they may be good, but they can also keep you busy. And the busier you are, the noisier your life can get. And it's really, really hard to hear his still, small, constant, loving voice say no, or stop, or forgive, or go back, or don't. And when you can slow down and you can